The house breathes silence around me, a silence that tastes of metal and distance. My fingers trace the edge of the cold phone screen, the small glowing that a cruel, mocking star miles away. It should be here, in the driveway, under the oak tree, its familiar shape a silent promise of escape, of routine. But it's not. It's 100 miles south, moving fast, a trajectory I don't recognize, a destination I can't comprehend. Not until later. The first tremor is just confusion, a jolt of, where could it possibly be, before the ground truly splits open. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe, it helps me more than you know. Life before felt like a perfectly tiled mosaic. Every piece in place, predictable, comfortable. There was the morning rhythm, the scrape of toast, the shared newspaper, his section first, the clatter of keys, the goodbye kiss that always landed slightly off-center. There was the house, not grand, but ours, smelling faintly of old books and the detergent I insisted on using. There was him, Mark. Solid, reliable Mark. Or so I believed. He had this way of filling a room, not loudly but just present. A comfortable weight beside me on the sofa, a steady hand reaching for mine. Our days were a quiet hum, a low, constant frequency of togetherness. My car, a sleek silver sedan, was my slice of that life that felt purely mine. I'd saved for it, chosen every feature, felt a fierce, quiet pride in its smooth lines, the way it handled the road. It wasn't just transport, it was my mobile sanctuary, the place I sang off-key, the bubble of quiet I inhabited between work and home. It represented my independence within the shared life, a parallel line that ran alongside his, always expected to converge back at the house, under the oak tree. The disruption didn't arrive with a bang, but with a creeping, insidious quiet. It started, I think, with small absences. Late nights at work that stretched later. A new phone he was suddenly inseparable from. A certain guardedness in his eyes, fleeting when I asked simple questions. I brushed it off. Stress, I told myself. Everyone gets stressed. Then came the morning I needed the car, and it wasn't there. Not just out for a quick errand. The garage was empty. His car was still there. A note? A text? Nothing. A cold knot formed in my stomach. He must have taken it, I reasoned. Maybe his car had a flat he hadn't mentioned. Maybe he was running late and grabbed the closest keys. But the keys to my car hung on the hook. The spares were in my purse. A new wave of unease washed over me. Where were those keys? And why my car? The first attempts to understand felt frantic, grasping in the dark. I called his office. He wasn't there, hadn't been in yet. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. My texts went unanswered, the little delivery ticks remaining stubbornly gray. Panic clawed at my throat. Was he okay? An accident? I started picturing crumpled metal, flashing lights. I called the police. They were sympathetic but distant. A missing person? A stolen vehicle? How long has it been? A few hours isn't long, they needed more. More proof of distress, more time elapsed. They treated it like a minor inconvenience, a car theft, not a life-shattering mystery. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sudden, terrifying ocean of uncertainty. I paced the house, checking rooms he wasn't in, looking for clues to a disappearance I didn't understand. Every creak of the house settling sounded like a door slamming shut on explanations. Then came the cold, hard data. The car had a built-in tracker, part of a security package I'd insisted on. My independent streak, paying off in the most twisted way imaginable. I logged into the app, my hands shaking. The map loaded, showing the silvered, moving steadily south, far from his office, far from any route he'd ever take. It wasn't random driving. It was purposeful, a planned trajectory. And then I saw it. A notification I'd previously ignored, buried in my emails from the car service provider. An alert. The primary driver profile had been changed. A new profile added. Not his name. A woman's name.
Sarah.
Sarah who? The blood drained from my face, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a theft. It was calculated. He wasn't missing. He was gone. With her. In my car. The midpoint shift wasn't a gentle turn. It was a violent, sickening lurch into a reality I couldn't have conjured in my worst nightmares. My goals shifted instantly, brutally. Find the car? No. That on the screen wasn't just metal and tires. It was a symbol of betrayal, a moving monument to the end of everything I thought was real. My focus narrowed, sharp and lethal. They took my car for their getaway. They wouldn't get away in it. Processing the betrayal was like being flayed alive, layer by layer. The confusion curdled into white-hot rage, then a deep, bone-weary sorrow. Every shared memory felt poisoned. Every I love you a lie. Every touch a performance. He hadn't just left. He'd orchestrated it using my own resources, my own hard-earned independence weaponized against me. The rising challenges weren't external anymore. They were internal, a battle against the tidal wave of pain threatening to drown me before I could act. How could I think straight? How could I plan? The practical challenge of stopping them felt monumental, yet strangely clear. The car. My car. It had the tracker. It had the remote access features I'd barely thought about. Remote start, remote unlock, remote lock. And disable engine. A feature designed for theft recovery, for emergencies. A feature now suddenly, terrifyingly empowering. The deepening crisis was the ticking clock. That it moved relentlessly south, putting more and more distance between them and, well, between them and any semblance of consequences. They were getting away. Each mile felt like a victory for them, a nail in the coffin of my old life. The police were still useless, logged a report, promised to look into it. Look into what? A husband who took his wife's car? They saw a domestic dispute, maybe a joyride. They didn't see the calculated cruelty, the use of my property for their illicit escape. I couldn't rely on them. I had only myself. And the car. The doubt crept in, cold and sharp. What if I messed it up? What if I triggered an alert? What if they stopped? What if they abandoned the car? All seemed lost if they vanished into the anonymity of distance. The silence in the house was no longer just empty. It was oppressive, filled with the ghosts of a future that would never arrive. My hands trembled, but not from fear anymore. From a cold, building certainty. The turning point wasn't a sudden revelation, but a hardening. The grief was still there, a dull ache under my ribs, but it was encased in something else now. Something cold and sharp. I watched the dot on the screen, tracking its progress minute by minute. They were on the highway now, open road, miles from any major exit or service station. The perfect stretch. Empty fields on either side. No quick turnoffs. I thought about them in the car, laughing, maybe celebrating their freedom, their escape. In my car. Using my property. The thought was a spark that ignited the reservoir of cold fury. There was no more hesitation. No more what-ifs. The decision was made with a clarity that felt almost serene. They wanted a getaway? They could have one. Right into the waiting arms of consequence. I brought up the app on my phone, navigating to the security features. My finger hovered over the remote immobilization option. It felt surreal, this much power resting in my hand, controlled by a tap on a screen. It wasn't just about stopping them. It was about a specific kind of justice. A poetic, technological justice. They would be stopped by the thing they stole, by the person they betrayed, because of the very property they misused. The climax arrived on a stretch of highway somewhere south of the state line. The map showed that, moving steadily, confidently. I had been watching for hours, the screen a window into their oblivious escape. My breath hitched in my throat, a tight, painful knot. My finger hovered over the icon. I pictured the car, silver and sleek, cruising along, the engine humming, carrying them away from everything. Carrying them into their new life built on my ruins. Not today. Not in my car. I took a deep, shaky breath, held it, and tapped the screen. The command sent, traversing fiber optic lines, bouncing off satellites, a silent, invisible tether reaching across the miles. On the screen, the dot paused, then stopped. They wouldn't have known what was happening at first. Maybe a sputter from the engine, a warning light on the dash, confusion. Then, as the speed dropped, the system would fully engage. Engine cut, transmission locked. The car, my car, would have glided to a stop in the middle of the highway, silent and immovable. A sudden, jarring halt to their grand escape. I didn't hear the screaming, not with my ears, but I heard it in my mind. I saw their faces, the shock, the disbelief, the dawning horror as they realized the car was dead. Stranded. Nowhere to go. Miles from anywhere. Their escape vehicle transformed into a prison. They were trapped not by a roadblock, not by police sirens they could outrun, but by the very thing they had used to flee. By me. By my cold, remote command. The car held them captive, a silent, silver trap on the asphalt. I imagined Mark's face, the cocky confidence draining away, replaced by panic, by confusion, then by the awful realization that I had done this. That the woman he had betrayed, whose property he had stolen for his freedom, had used that very property to bring his world crashing down around him. The screaming would have been internal first, then external.
Blame.
Accusation. Directed at each other, trapped together in the suddenly hostile confines of my car. Their grand gesture of freedom ending ignominiously, stranded, waiting. Waiting for the inevitable. The police would be called. A disabled vehicle on the highway. An obstruction. They would arrive. They would find them. And then the questions would start. Questions they couldn't lie their way out of. Not when the car was registered to me. Not when the system logs would show my command stopping the vehicle. Not when his panicked phone calls from the stranded car would be logged, likely trying to figure out what had happened, who had done this. The screaming I imagined was the sound of their future dying, choked off by a remote signal, a silent, invisible hand reaching across the miles to pull them back to face the mess they had made. The aftermath was a strange kind of quiet. The phone screen still showed the dot motionless now. The immediate surge of adrenaline faded, leaving behind a vast, empty space. There was no triumphant cheer, no feeling of overwhelming victory. Just a profound, bone-deep weariness. The car was recovered. He and Sarah were detained, questioned. The story unfolded in hushed phone calls and sterile police station visits. The car logs were undeniable. My ownership, my remote command. It wasn't just car theft. It was complicated by the domestic angle, the clear intent of elopement. The police understood then. This wasn't a simple case. The legal mess was protracted, draining. Divorce papers served. Charges filed related to the misuse of the vehicle, the attempted elopement. It was messy, public in the small ways these things become public in a town. People whispered. Some looked at me with pity, others with a strange mix of awe and fear. I became the woman who stopped her husband's getaway car remotely. It was a title I hadn't sought, a power born of betrayal I wouldn't have wished on anyone. Getting my car back felt heavy. It sat in the driveway under the oak, exactly where it belonged, but it was changed. It carried the ghosts of their journey, their failed escape. I ran my hand over the hood, felt the cool metal under my palm. It was still my car, my independence. But the shine was dulled by what it had witnessed. It was a symbol now, not just of my freedom, but of resilience, of taking back control. The silence in the house lingered, but it started to feel different. Less like an absence, more like a blank canvas. The comfortable mosaic of my old life was shattered, yes. But staring at the pieces, I began to see the possibility of arranging them differently. Of building something new, something entirely my own, without the hidden cracks of deceit. The grief was still there, a scar that would likely never fully fade, but the sharp edges softened. The cold satisfaction of the climax gave way to a quiet determination. I had been broken, but not destroyed. I had been betrayed, but I had fought back. I had used the tools at my disposal, messy and painful as it was, to reclaim my life from the narrative they had tried to write for me. The car sits in the driveway. Sometimes, when I get in, I think about that stretch of highway, the silent stop, the screaming I didn't hear but felt in my bones. It's a reminder. A reminder of what was lost, yes. But also a reminder of the quiet strength I found when everything fell apart. The strength to look at the screen, see them running and calmly, coldly bring their world to a halt. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.